the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Shalom.
If you've got a tip for Melissa, an unsolved murder, a true crime mystery that mystifies you, the way to San Jose, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now, here's your host. Her GSK file is so thick it's beginning to look a lot like something the police should investigate. Melissa Morgan.
And more cowbell. Oh, my beloved producer Mark, you could not be more correct. My Golden State Killer file is approaching 2 inches in thickness.
I think I'm calling the authorities.
I think 2 inches in thickness is about the diameter of the Golden State Killer's penis. So that's sort of like I think it's meant to be.
Maybe it's meant to be. Maybe you're subconsciously doing it as a...
I am. I'm collecting paper to replicate the size of his tiny...
Okay. Mm-hmm. Of his tiny little pecker?
Yeah, that too.
Okay.
Oh, pecker. That's so cute. What are you, like, 107?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I actually am. Close to it.
You're immortal. You're a Highlander.
Yeah.
Right. You're a Highlander. Wow. It's been a big 3 weeks, and it's getting bigger. It's getting bigger. Not only my file, definitely not the Golden State Killer's penis, not getting bigger. And it's amazing. This case is like the case that keeps on giving. There's more information, more stories, more crimes linked to him, more horror, more relief. It's very fascinating. It's as you know, the old Chinese saying, "May you live in interesting times," which is sort of an insult. It is an interesting time to be alive and to be obsessed with true crime and obsessed with this case, which is, you know, I'm still a little stunned at the number of people who don't know about it or don't care because it's huge for me. And not just because I live in California. It's huge because of the MO, the details, the long-reaching fingers of his terror, which one of the surviving family members, Bruce Harrington, sums up in a wonderful quote, which I'll read later. But before we head into, and I will be honest, this is hard to admit, I'm gonna miss this. I'm gonna miss talking about this. I know this is the third and what, you know, I would call the final episode, but that's just for now because I'm quite sure there will be more information that comes out for months and maybe even years. We don't know how long this is going to go on since he has still not even made a plea. I'm not sure how long. I tried to find that out. I found out in a retrial, if you're being retried, you have 180 days to answer a complaint and make your plea. I don't know if that's also, if there's any legal eagles out there who can give me that information, please feel free to email or call us at any time. We would be delighted to have that information and have it correct, because I couldn't find the actual correct answer online anywhere, no matter how I worded it in my Google searchy box. So
your searchy box, you know, I think
that's my stripper name.
As you were saying that,
searchy box.
Yes.
Sorry.
All right then.
But it's with two X's. Sorry.
Okay. I'm not,
I made producer Mark snort.
Okay. Now let's see, where was I? No, as you were saying that, searchy box.
Yes.
I was thinking.
You can call me Searchy.
It seems to me that there. I don't know if there's an unlimited amount of time, but I think at some point the court can decide, okay, that's enough time. I'm going to enter a plea for you.
Oh.
I think the court can do that if they take too long.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure, but I don't know if there's a set time. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, that's as good of an answer as any. And if anyone has a better answer, feel free to, again, email us or call us at the jttipsters@gmail.com or at our Tipster hotline, which I have no clue. Is it
It's
832
Tipster.
Thank you. I don't call. It's how you don't know your own phone number. You don't call it, so you don't know it. And I don't have it programmed onto my iPhone, so I don't know. Yeah, we would love that information. I know he has another appearance coming up the day after Memorial Day, March 29th. So he, was arrested, and when he was brought in a few days after his arrest in his wheelchair, didn't make a plea. Now on the 14th of May, he walked in under his own steam. So that's another piece of information that was fascinating to learn. He had apparently, it had been rumored, he was starving and he refused water and food and visitors. And, but he still managed to walk in on the 14th on his own power. So he's getting sustenance, or he's just, remarkably strong that 2.5 weeks after his arrest, he's not eating or drinking and he hasn't dehydrated and blown away. So his attorney said that he wouldn't be entering a plea that day. She is also, she's prescient and said he probably wouldn't be entering a plea on the 29th either. She says it's due to the overwhelming amount of evidence that the prosecution has to share with her. Well, if your client, didn't leave his DNA all over the entire state of California, maybe you wouldn't have a lot of evidence to go through. So before we head into this episode 3, wrapping it up, and as I said, I'm going to miss this, but I know it'll be back like a bad penny. I know I'll have more, updates later on. We're going to take a trip back in time. So this piece of evidence, I have to say, of all of the amazing coverage that this story has gotten, and there are many fantastic specials out there. I am a very stubborn, mule-headed person, and many people said, hey, you should watch the special on HLN. And I'm like, headline news, you fucking morons, that's going to be bad. No, I'm not going to watch that. And one of Mark's beloved coworkers, Christopher Chase, it was like, hey, have you ever heard about this Golden State Killer thing? And I'm like, yes, I have, quite a bit. And he had watched the HLN special, and I thought, it's like a 5-part special, Unmasking a Killer, I believe it's called. And I was like, oh, if Chris Chase likes it, I guess I'll have to give it a fucking shot. And I'll be goddamned if it isn't the best coverage. It doesn't have all of the minute details, but the details it does have are some things I have never heard anywhere else before. And I love it. And I actually saved it on our DVD-R so that I can watch it over and over again like an obsessive serial killer. I mean, I'm not that at all, but as far as you know. But this piece of information, I do not know how this has not been reported, but perhaps they needed to keep it quiet. This was recorded and reported before his arrest, so maybe they were just really pushing hard since 2016 when Sacramento County DA Anne Marie Schubert got a task force together of the best and the brightest. I will give her all the street cred in the world for that, because she got together an amazing team. And that amazing team, I think, looked under every rock and went through the 57 boxes and 150,000 pages of information on this case, starting in Northern California and going all the way down to Southern California. So this I found really fascinating, because they keep crediting him with over 50 rapes, 125 ransackings, which we know now are connected to him, and 12 murders. And I pray that soon they will be calling it 13 murders, because we all sort of knew that Claude Snelling was his first murder before he went and developed his MO in a different way. Some investigators call him very intelligent and shrewd and crafty. Some investigators call him not that smart, but just fucking lucky. And I think he got lucky more times than we'll ever know. But we know that from 72, 73, when he we're pretty sure it's him, started the ransacking. In 1975, he killed Claude Snelling because he attempted to remove his daughter Beth from their home in the middle of the night. And one of the most beautiful things I've read is Beth Snelling's mother said, she of course carried a lot of guilt with her father dying trying to defend her, and her mother said it wouldn't matter if there were 50 men outside the house, your father would have done the same thing. So he loved you that much, he would do anything. So Claude Snelling, and I hate saying this, it breaks my heart to say this, but there were signs. The profilers feel that the Golden State Killer that had a huge crush on Beth Snelling and totally stalked her and was obsessed with her. She was 16 and beautiful, and they had had phone calls at the house. Claude had come home from work one night. He was a literary professor at Sierra College of the Canyons, and there was a man in the yard, and he chased him and lost him. Many phone calls. Beth was in her room with her boyfriend and was talking about, there's this guy who's going in and ransacking people's homes, and my dad saw a guy in the yard, and I wonder if he's, watching me. And she lifted up her blinds to find a man looking through her window who ran away. A few weeks after that, 3:30 in the morning, 1975, Beth Snelling wakes up to a man with his hand over her mouth saying, "If you scream, I'll kill you." He attempts to take her out through her window, and it doesn't work, so he walks her to the back sliding glass door that he had pried open. Claude Snelling is awakened, hears what's happening, walks to the backyard, and attempts to take down the Golden State Killer at this point, who becomes a killer, the East Area Rapist. And he is shot once in the shoulder, it spins him around, and then he's shot in the back. And he throws Beth to the ground, and he hits her with the gun and then kicks her 3 times in the face and runs out of the yard. Now here's the real important part. That gun that he shoots Claude Snelling with belonged to a previous burglary victim, Pat Mono. So just a month or so before he kills Claude Snelling. So we go back to 1975. Pat Mono, who is one of the coolest, toughest old fucking crackers I've ever seen in my life. He's 83 now, and he is big time Italian, or as Mark, who's half Sicilian, calls them, eye-ties.
Goomba.
There, he's wears a fucking baseball hat that says Italia on it. He's the fucking cutest, old, grizzled, he's just...
Sounds like my grandfather on my mother's
Oh
side.
my God, I love him. And he is a spitfire. Okay, so in 1975, Pat Mono returns to his home with his wife and his daughter after he's visited his sister in Fresno. He finds, it's the middle of the afternoon, he finds every kitchen drawer, everything dumped on the floor. Now, there are pictures, there are crime scene photos that are available. So he walked into his bedroom and saw that every pair of his, as he calls them, tidy whities, his underwear, are placed on the floor going down the hallway into the family room, perfectly placed and spaced like stepping stones. His underwear.
Oh, for God's sake.
Yeah. The thief took his wife's jewelry, which was expensive stuff, didn't take any of it, just scattered it around. Not even like the diamond earrings, nothing. But what he did take was an Eisenhower coin, some framed photos, some pictures of Beth in her bikini, one of every set of her earrings, one, and a .38 caliber pistol.
Gee, that's the pistol that killed Claude Snelling?
It is. It has been matched.
Now, this is before he was if I remember from episode 1 of this,
You
part 1.
you pay attention to this bullshit? I'm very proud of you.
I try to.
Go ahead.
If I recall from part 1, Claude was probably the first murder victim.
Yes, he was.
And Beth was probably the first attempt at rape, right?
Well, so he'd spent 72 through 75 ransacking. And he tried something a little different in 1975, and it went really badly. So after attempting to remove Beth from her home, he realized he needed to come up with a new MO, which is breaking into their homes, holding them hostage, and raping them there. God knows what would have happened to Beth Snelling if he had actually succeeded in taking her out of her home. I don't know that he really wanted to kill her. I don't know that he'd progressed that far in his thought pattern. Maybe that's the part where law enforcement doesn't think he's that smart, but he definitely is now tied to a 13th murder, and I pray to God that they get him on that one too, because what better of a hero than a father who would die to save his child from a monster who appears at their house in the middle of the night. So back to Pat Mono. Before he kills Claude Snelling with Pat's .38 revolver, he calls a couple of weeks after he's ransacked their house, and his wife answers, and she screams, and Pat picks up another receiver and says, "Who is this?" And the caller says, "I'm going to tell you the same thing I told your wife. I'm going to kill her, I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to kill your daughter." And without missing a beat, fabulous, crusty old, and he wasn't that old at the time, crusty old Pat Mono says, "Well, buddy, you made one mistake. You left my shotgun. So you can try, but I'll be waiting for you." And the caller hung up.
Now that makes me wonder if that's why he didn't come back there.
That's a good question.
The attitude, you know.
You know what? That's actually a really good question. You know, when he was given any pushback, it did not go well, as we know with Greg Sanchez. And it didn't happen often because he made sure that he was in control and that there wasn't an opportunity for pushback. So the fact that Pat Mono was, "I'm not going to let this fucking creep intimidate me, and I'm going to let him know how and why it's going to happen," maybe he did stay away. He, you know, at his heart, he is a coward. I mean, if you're a real, true serial killer who evolves or devolves, however you want to look at it, you don't spend decades torturing your victims who have remained alive with my new favorite term, telephone scatologia. So it's a paraphilia where you call people and get sexual gratification from talking dirty to them or threatening them or whatever his particular fun bent is. So he may just be the biggest coward of them all. I don't know, but that seems, I mean, I've heard, my favorite word to describe it is infantile. I mean, it's truly infantile for a grown-ass adult man to call people after you've terrorized and threatened them. Call them on the phone. You're a faceless voice torturing people. They don't know which foot to put down first because they might crack an eggshell and it might happen again. I mean, he's just the worst kind of monster.
It really is. And you know what just occurred to me is that you mentioned this either in the second parts 1 or 2. You mentioned that, you know, back when he did. Oh, it was in the response you wrote to the idiot that was saying, "Oh, he's anyway."
Yeah, he was in shock.
He was in shock. But that, you know, caller ID did not exist back then.
That's right.
And I wonder if part of the reason he stopped was that he couldn't do that anymore.
Oh, my darling, that is all going to be addressed later in this episode.
Okay.
It is addressed beautifully and how this episode wraps up with an epilogue in Michelle McNamara's book. It is addressed exquisitely and beautifully, and we'll get to that. So now we're jumping forward to the Southern California years. And again, we have to go a little bit backward and forward from 1980 to 1981 because of his amazing travelogue that he managed to figure out, going back and forth between Ventura County and Orange County, skipping LA County completely. Still don't understand that, but hey, what do I know? So at the end of episode 2, he had murdered, the alleged Golden State Killer had murdered Sherry Domingo and Greg Sanchez in July of 1981. So we go backward a little bit to August of 1980. Keith and Patrice Harrington, they're newlyweds, and they were beaten to death with an unknown instrument because he now takes the weapon with him. He's picked up a few tricks along the way. He'll tie them up, but he will take the restraints with him this time instead of leaving them. This is because he now kills the victims and doesn't need them tied up anymore because they can't do him any harm. So Thursday, August 21st, of 1980, Roger Harrington has been invited over for dinner to a house he owns that his son and daughter-in-law live in Dana Point. And his son Keith is 24. His new wife, they've literally been married like 3 months, is 28. She's a nurse, and he's studying to be a doctor at UC Irvine. Keith had been in a really long-term relationship with another woman when he was in pre-med. And the other woman decided to go to college across the country, and it just wasn't going to work out. So they broke up, and everyone was shocked and surprised that they broke up and that they didn't get married. And he met Patrice shortly after that. They were both at UC Irvine. And she was a few years older and already a nurse and was very happy in her career. So apparently she was a wonderful, sweet woman, but no one knew her that well in the family because they really hadn't known each other that long. I mean, they met just a few months before and got married in May, and then here it is August, and they haven't even been together a year, and they were murdered together. So Roger Harrington had 4 sons, and that comes into play later too because he apparently must have been a really good dad because his kids are stellar human beings. So he buys a house in Niguel Shores, Laguna Niguel or Dana Point. It's very close together. Niguel Shores is the name of the development. He buys it in 1972, and it's not for him to live there. He still wants to live in Long Beach, which is where his business is, which is ironically home security systems. It's just heartbreaking. He made his millions in home security systems, and his son and daughter-in-law are murdered in a home paid for by home security systems. So he went from being flat broke to being, very well off. And he had these 4 sons, and Keith is his youngest. And he was a millionaire by the time Keith was murdered. So Keith and Patty never used the master bedroom in the house because it was, Roger's house, and they weren't going to stay there that long. They were just going to be there until Keith graduated from med school in December. So they left the master bedroom for Roger to sleep in whenever he visited for any overnight visits, and they just stayed in one of the guest bedrooms, and they were happy there. And Roger sounds like I said, like a pretty good dad. He raised some pretty good sons who really, he instilled in them, a drive, a sense of family, some competitiveness. They were all his sons were very athletic and had big goals, and it seems like they achieved them. And apparently Keith was the sweetest of all of the boys, the sweet baby boy. So Roger was used to their schedule, and he was surprised when the front door was locked and he showed up to the house. But he knew where the spare key was because it's his house and it's kept in a little thing over the front door. So he finds it and he walks in because he's expected for dinner. And it's 2 days after, day and a half actually, after they've been murdered. And the house is strangely quiet. And he's yelling, hello, and there's no answer. And he's like, oh, they must just be busy or in the garage. He looks in the garage and their cars are still there. He walks through the kitchen. He notices there's a bag of groceries on the counter. And it's not perishable stuff, but it still seems odd that it's just a bag of groceries sitting on the kitchen counter. So he goes down the hall, and oddly, the door to the master bedroom is open, but the door to the spare bedroom, which is where Patrice and Keith slept, was closed. He opens the door and sees that the bed is made up, but he can tell there are bodies under it. So he pulls the bedspread down, and he sees the nightmare. Keith is purple. He'd been dead for a couple days. He was face down, and his head is turned to the left. There's not much blood, but he can tell he's been hit in the head. Now, Patrice, is next to him, also on her stomach, head turned to the left, and blood is everywhere. The comforter and pillow that are near her are drenched. She is beaten beyond recognition. He stumbles out of the house and calls the sheriff's department, and the dispatcher told him to sit in his car. So there wasn't much that came out about this double murder, and they really sure didn't know that it was at all connected to the East Area rapist / Golden State Killer. And most of what little information that has come out was known by Roger, because he's the one who found everything. Now, he didn't pull the comforter far enough down to know if Patty had been sexually assaulted, and she had been. He didn't know that there were ligature marks around their wrists and ankles and that they had been bound, but they had been. And it had been with brown macrame cord, but it had been cut off and removed, which is part of the new MO of the Golden State Killer, where he will take the weapon and take the bindings. They weren't sure how or what was used, but a piece of brass was found in Patty's skull, and there were brass-topped sprinkler heads that were easily available in the yard, and one was missing. Now, because Charlene and Lyman Smith, the scene was so bloody, they feel like that he was evolving and learning some things to help protect himself. Instead of being, covered in blood, he puts something over them, typically a comforter, a sheet, and then bludgeons the shit out of them or shoots them, and doesn't get any blowback on himself. And
that answers a big question that I had about that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And were you wondering how he got away without being covered in blood?
Being covered in blood, yeah. Especially
since he entered most of the houses wearing no pants.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. He's pulling sheets and bedspreads over their heads, and then, So now we know he takes the women to another room to rape them. So what he's doing as he's evolving into the murder is that he probably ties up the female, or ties up the male, then ties up the female, takes the female out of the room, comes back and kills the male with one hit usually. He doesn't hit the men. He doesn't hurt the men. I shouldn't say hurt. He kills them. He doesn't take out anger on the men. They're hit typically one time. The women, however, are typically way overkill. So he takes the women to another room, rapes them, brings them back to the bed. They now realize that their partner or spouse has been murdered, and now it's their turn. So I imagine the fear and terror of going through something like that. I can't imagine that. So the ligatures are taken now. The weapon is taken. They find small pieces of the macrame cord on Keith's lower back, which shows that their hands have been bound behind them. It's really sort of weird when they figure that whoever has done this has come in, bound them, killed them, removed the comforter, cut off the ties, and then put the cover back on top of them. And what they surmise is that it's not so much about regret. A lot of times if someone who's been murdered has been covered, especially the face, it's thought that psychologically the murderer knew the person and couldn't stand them looking at them or couldn't stand to know what they've done. They really feel like with the Golden State Killer, he was going to revel in the fact that someone was going to have to uncover them and reveal it and be shocked and seen his horrible work. So I don't think there's a whole lot of regret here. And maybe this, besides covering them up to bludgeon them, so as producer Mark had said in the last episode, so that there's no loud gun noise. If someone hears someone, scream, sometimes you can pass that off. You're not going to hear someone be bludgeoned unless you're listening at their, door or window. And you can get away with something like that much easier than a gunshot where most people would pay attention, although we've seen a lot of people don't. It's sort of sad. So there's no forced entry. Not sure how he got in, but they felt like it was a safe neighborhood since it's a gated community. And it also didn't have any of the earmarks that the typical attacks had before. The canals that he could hide under or in or run down. There wasn't a whole lot of places that he could park. It was a corner house. It really didn't look like a kind of place he would attack, but I don't know how to explain this, but it's pretty interesting.
I didn't know it was a gated community. How did he get in?
Well, isn't that a great question?
Wow.
Isn't that a great question?
I guess over
I know.
time. Maybe.
I hope so. We can hope so. So there was a neighbor that, it had heard from another neighbor that she had heard screaming at an early hour in the middle of the night, but Roger Harrington could never find that neighbor. And, Patty was beaten, like I said, beyond recognition. And Keith was just hit once, but enough to kill him. So he left without any souvenirs, no tokens, no nothing this time, except for the weapon and the ligatures. So he's kind of changed his MO, didn't really ransack anything. He didn't terrorize them. As far as they know, he hadn't called them and, terrorized them before. And he murdered. He murdered just shittily and effortlessly. He did it. And then, pointlessly cuts off their bindings, but left some fiber. So I guess he didn't do such a great job.
Yeah, so maybe he's not that bright.
It's one of those things that I find so fascinating is that law enforcement is like, he's brilliant. And other ones are, he's not brilliant. He's just lucky. And I tend to agree that he just really lucked out. He just really lucked out.
Well, it could be that he's just really good at strategizing, like the event itself, to not get caught. But he's not thinking about forensic evidence. I don't know.
Well, that could be true. I mean, you're right, I guess. The only thing that probably in the 80s that was really, or the early 80s that was really helpful would be fingerprints, and he wore gloves. So, and he didn't get blood on him to track it around. There, shoe prints outside, but, he'd done some really bizarre things back in Ventura with Charlene and Lyman Smith. I mean, it was a bloody mess, and he didn't cover them, so they really figured that he got blood on him there. So when he moves down the coast to the Harringtons, he covered them. He did really bizarre things. In Rancho Cordova, when he first started, he put a bird bath under a phone line leading into a house from a power pole. And he stood on, and even though he was 5'10", he stood on the bird bath trying to cut the phone line, but he couldn't do it.
Okay.
I know.
It's kind of comical if it wasn't so tragic.
It is. It's very odd. It's very odd. I mean, and then even when he got into that house, he forgot to cut the phone line. And it's just, he's trying to make it look like a burglary gone bad, but it really doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. So a profiler says that evidence reveals that the male victims were likely eliminated prior to the sexual assault and the murder of the female victims during the couples. Keith Harrington was struck in the head with a blunt instrument. There were scratches in the headboard that shows where Keith was struck in the head. There's a wood chip in the bed and on the sheets between Patrice Harrington's legs. So they surmise that because that's the way he killed Keith Harrington, that he likely was evolving his MO, and he's killing the men first in the rest of the cases. So the Harrington family, Bruce Harrington, Keith's brother. I'm an only child, and I really loved being an only child. But if I had a brother, I would pray to God it would be somebody like Bruce Harrington. Because I think Keith Harrington's death shaped and molded Bruce Harrington's life. And he didn't need a purpose or something to do because he, becomes a very successful attorney and developer in Orange County and Newport Beach. But I'll be goddamned if this man never gave up the fight to find his brother's killer. And in the most amazing way, he puts his money where his mouth is and spends over $2 million of his own money to get California Proposition 69 passed. And that allows for the collection of DNA samples from convicted felons in California. And it not only helps with the collection of DNA of convicted felons, it helps exonerate those that are innocent. It's a stunning thing that other states are using California as a role model, and it's Bruce Harrington fighting pretty fucking hard to get this done. So if you happen to be able to access the press conference from April 25th when all of the DAs are together and talking about the arrest of the Golden State Killer, Bruce Harrington gives a speech that is spectacular. And I literally ended up sobbing and screaming at my television, Bruce Harrington for president. I mean, he is real and organic and passionate and eloquent, but not stodgy, and obsessed with getting justice for his brother and sister-in-law's murder. And his quote that I love is, he was so smart and had such foresight to know, alluding to what producer Mark said, that maybe he gave up because technology was catching up to him and he wasn't going to be able to hide and be a faceless monster anymore. Bruce Harrington said, "It's clear from my family's point of view, my two brothers and myself, that the only realistic way we're going to identify who killed Keith and Patrice is through DNA technology. And that is why we champion anything that will make more robust the DNA data bank throughout the U.S., not just in California." And he says there are 200, 300, maybe 400 extended family members whose loved ones were victims of this monster. And without a doubt, he is or was the most brazen serial rapist killer in California history. And he's right. And he fought, and it is so now. Convicted felons, if you're convicted, it used to be just murder and rape, and now it's any felony. They take your DNA. And I know this is a conversation for another time. It would be a much too long conversation. But I'm with Bruce. If you don't, commit a felony, you shouldn't be worried about your DNA being in a system. And poor Joseph James D'Angelo, whose fourth cousin twice removed, who came from Germany, put her DNA in the GED match website. Boo fucking who. Boo hoo, motherfucker. Boo fucking who. So, sorry, again, I guess you know where I stand on,
I do.
On DNA.
And at some point in some other episode down the road, we should talk about this stuff.
We should.
It's
I know.
interesting.
And I know there are two sides. And I know there's the ACLU is probably writing my name down and building a bomb made of dog shit that they'll set fire and put on my front porch. But I don't care. I pick up a shitload of dog shit already. So come at me, ACLU. Come at me. You ain't going to win. So on February 4th or 5th of 1981, Manuela Withune, who lives in Irvine, received some bizarre phone calls at her home, and it sounds like an older African-American male. And she doesn't really put a lot of stock into it, but they are recorded on her phone's answering machine. Now, her husband is in the hospital, David, with a viral infection. And she goes to visit him at the hospital on February 6th, and she doesn't really want to go home alone. Now, her father, who is a German Shepherd, says, I'll lend my dog to you so you're not alone. She's like, no, that's all right. She goes home by herself, and I know how she feels, because when producer Mark is on business trips, I, hate sleeping by myself. She felt she wanted to feel more comforted, so she actually slept in her sleeping bag on top of her bed, because it made her feel probably wrapped in a little cocoon. So on February 6th, she is found raped and murdered, lying on her bed in her sleeping bag. She is bludgeoned. There's ligature marks on both wrists and on her right ankle. There's more fibers found at the base of her spine, which is what they found with Keith Harrington, so knowing that her wrists were behind her. The house was entered by forcing open a sliding door at the rear of the house, and oddly burnt wooden matches are found in the house and in the garage. There were burnt wooden matches also found in Goleta. I don't know the significance of that. I just find it a fascinating tidbit. The suspect left the flat shank screwdriver behind, which is what he used to pry the sliding door open. There is a smudge of brown paint on the handle of the screwdriver, and detectives researched it and found that it's a Behr paint, B-E-H-R, a Behr brand of paint, but they couldn't really develop any clue that would be significant to that. There's been chips of paint left on other people that they felt maybe the killer was somehow a blue-collar worker. It was an architectural type paint, so it could have been someone who was a house painter or someone who was just painting their house. But that also didn't really pan out where that could have come from. So the things that he stole this time were a lamp and a crystal ball. And they both weighed about 9 pounds. So it's kind of odd. The other thing he stole, the tape from the answering machine. So the calls from the 2 days prior were probably him. I'm not sure why Manuela thought it was an older African-American man, but perhaps he was trying to disguise his voice. But I'm gonna guess he doesn't steal the answering machine tape without having a reason to think he might be implicated, if that makes sense.
Or maybe he'd just get a kick out of listening to it.
Yeah, maybe he just want to see who's calling Manuela. I wonder who's calling. I'm going to play this little tape here.
No.
Beep.
He might get off on hearing his own.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
I like the sound effects.
I am nothing if I'm not Michael Winslow from Police Academy. I can pretty much do anything. Did you hear that? Beep. Brrr. That's the rewinding. I'm good.
Yeah.
I am good. Okay, so there's tennis shoe impressions in the backyard, and instead of the Adidas runners, these are a racquetball type shoe called Tread 2, T-R-E-D. They're located in the backyard. The wooden matches found, so bizarre. Don't understand that. And this wonderful tidbit, a television set, and we're talking 1981. So it's not like a little flat screen you can carry under your arm home from Costco. No, it's a big ass fucking, CRT television set carried to the back fence and placed against it. Television set.
What?
So they're saying that he may have, slowed down. Maybe he's not as athletic and needed something to help jump over the fence. I don't get it. I don't know if he was trying to steal the TV and couldn't get it over the fence. I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know. So besides Manuela losing her life, which is of course the biggest tragedy, this is the story that pretty much kills me here. This kills me because he ruins the life of those lives he takes, but he ruins the life of anyone who knows or loves the victims. And he ruined David Withune's life. He ruined his life because they had not linked Manuela's murder, obviously, until 2001, to the East Area rapist / Golden State Killer. David Withune is considered a person of interest for a very long time.
Or like a murder for hire or something? Because he was in the hospital.
Yep.
Boy, that really is evil. I mean,
but it gets
awful.
worse. It gets worse. It gets a lot worse. For 20 years, he is a person of interest, and the last murder of Janelle Cruz, he is questioned in 1986 as if he killed her. And
oh man,
I know. So David doesn't do himself any favors. He has a coworker named Rhonda. They both work at a import car place, and he is friends with her at work and basically falls into her arms right after his house has been released by the police. It took apparently a long time to clean the house because of all of the blood. And when his house is finally released, he can't even go into the house. And Rhonda says, "Do you want to come to my house and sleep on my couch?" And he does. And pretty much after that, they're not really apart. They're pretty much together. And Manuela's father shows up at their place of work and asks a supervisor, "Where's Rhonda?" And he points her out, and Manuela's father, glares at her and David, thinking, that they were somehow together and on it. They dated for a while, and then they eventually got married. And again, he's questioned in 1986 after another murder in Irvine. They lived approximately a mile apart. And we will find out that in between those two residences is Joseph James D'Angelo's uncle, the brother of his stepfather, lives right in between.
Oh,
those
no,
two
that's
addresses.
new information to me.
Right in between. Oh yeah, that's something new that just came out because I cannot stop, looking at articles and online, and I'm way down the Golden State Killer rabbit hole. So Rhonda and David marry, and this is the other part that breaks my heart. The Golden State Killer tortured them until they moved, kept calling them, saying he was going to come and kill them, come and breathe heavy. I mean, he kills the man's first wife and then calls and threatens to kill him and his second wife.
And I'm guessing that David probably tries to report this to the police, and they are kind of, oh yeah, sure, right.
Rhonda does. And I don't know that anyone believes her or cares, because they still have David on their suspect list. And they don't exonerate him until 2001, when finally the DNA from Manuela is matched to the Golden State Killer. Finally. He was vindicated, but by then his life is pretty ruined. He is an alcoholic. He and Rhonda have divorced. At one point, she said she heard he was living on the street, and he ends up in Big Bear, and he dies in 2008 of what they call natural causes, but what I believe is cirrhosis of the liver.
God, that's
he ruined.
Boy, I can't even tell you how upset that makes me.
Ruined lives. So, and I know we're going back and forth in the timeline here, but so we know that Joseph James DeAngelo's step-uncle lived in Irvine, directly between the two residences of his last two murders, Manuela Withune and Janelle Cruz. And his father, when his parents divorced, his father, Joseph James DeAngelo Sr., moves to Korea and gets married and has 3 more children. Now are you sitting down? And he names them Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., Rebecca, and Constance. So now the only thing he doesn't have to make it a matched set from his first marriage, where his children are named Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., Constance Rebecca, and John DeAngelo. He doesn't have a John in his second marriage, but he has a Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., a Rebecca, and a Constance.
You see, that says something to me about old
Joseph Sr.?
Joe Sr. and Joe Jr., there's just something wrong.
Yeah. Sort of weird. So everyone is wondering about the mystery of the gap, the 5-year gap from killing Manuela Withune in 1981 to his, as far as we know, his final murder in 1986 of Janelle Cruz. So in 1981, after he kills Sherry Domingo and Greg Sanchez, he lays low. And another reason they thought is, number one, his first child is born in 81, a couple months after killing Sherry Domingo and Greg Sanchez. Number two, perhaps Greg Sanchez really did put a world of hurt on him because it was quite clear that there was a big-ass fight that got involved, and maybe he thought, I can't keep doing this, they're going to kill me. One of them's going to kill me. But he really steps up and perfects his telephone scatologia. So in October of 1982, he calls victim number 24 from back in Rancho Cordova in 1977, Margarita Lopez, a pseudonym. And he says, remember me? I'm going to come over and fuck you again, and you're going to suck my cock. In March of 1983, he honks at someone in a parking lot, and the guy gets out of his car and grabs him by the neck. And this is my favorite thing. Other than telephone scatologia, my next favorite new phrase I've learned, cocoa butted. Look it up, my beloved legal eagle. It's a legal term. He cocoa butted Joseph James DeAngelo in the teeth. It means head butted. It is in legal documents because I printed them out and laughed until I almost shit my pants.
That's hilarious.
Cocoa butted.
So this is a documented event.
It is.
Yeah.
And listen how it's backed up. An off-duty sheriff deputy actually witnessed it and corroborated DeAngelo's version of the events. So I love this man, and I wish he had just finished the job, like cocoa butted him and pushed his teeth down his throat till he choked, but he didn't. He really did lose teeth, which is just a shame, not at all. So this guy's name, Guy Paul Mazot, and Joseph James DeAngelo actually sues him in small claims court, and in September of 1984, he gets $2,938 plus court costs for his new orthodontia.
Yeah.
Cocoa butted.
Okay.
I think if you are angry at someone, threaten to cocoa butt them, and they'll either laugh or they'll pause and they'll give you a chance to actually damage them. I think cocoa butting is going to be my new...
Or they'll run.
Or they'll run because they think you're crazy and you're going to shit in your hand and throw it at him. That could happen too. Cocoa butting or shitting in your hand and throwing it at someone. So he has, an eventful couple of years with some weird shit, but he ramps back up for what they feel is his final murder. We will find out in the coming weeks, months, years if that's true. On Sunday, May 4th of 1986, Janelle Cruz, beautiful Janelle Cruz, is home by herself. Her younger sister, Michelle, is working at a Mammoth Mountain ski resort, and her mother and her boyfriend are vacationing in Cancun. And she's 18 years old and beautiful. And like I said, Joseph James D'Angelo's step-uncle, Mr. Bosenko, lives halfway between Manuela Withune and Janelle Cruz's house. So Janelle doesn't really want to be home alone, but she's trying to be brave, and she has a male friend that comes over, and they're just platonic. And they hang out for a while, listen to music, and they hear several noises. Sounds like a gate, something rattling, but they're saying, oh, it's a cat. It's no big deal. And this house is up for sale, like the Sherry Domingo Greg Sanchez house, like other houses where, there have been open houses where someone could have come by. And the friend leaves at 10:45. She arrives home. She leaves for a few minutes. She was working at a yogurt shop. She went to say hi to friends, came back at 11:15. She had a car that had a distinctive muffler. The neighbors heard the distinctive muffler and the door slam, and that was the last thing they heard. So on May 5th, a realtor finds her body. So Janelle, a young girl, lives in a lovely, safe, brand new development in Irvine, and she has a habit of leaving the doors unlocked. What they can see happened is that someone got in and surprised her in the kitchen. They hit her on the forehead. She struggles. There's blood on the kitchen floor. There's blood on the cabinets. There's some on the inside of the front door, which means she probably tried to get out. And there's blood on the wooden shutters. And then the next blood is on the headboard of her bed. So she's mostly nude. He's pulled her bra down to her waist. Her head is covered with blankets. And of course, when those are removed, her face is bashed in completely, and so is her forehead. There's blood all over her shoulders and neck. She's been violently raped. The rapist moved her in different positions on the bed. There's blades of grass from the front yard on the head of the bed and by her feet. And there's tennis shoe impressions found on the east side of the house. So there's lint found in her mouth, and they think that it's blue lint. It's like a medium blue in color, and they think it was from a bath towel that he tore to use as a gag. There's, of course, that's taken, so he didn't leave that. There's abrasions on her wrists, but there's no bruises. So that's explained that he tied her up, and having hit her in the kitchen after she tried to escape and he got her, she probably didn't struggle much after she was bound. So there's no bruising, but there's abrasions where the ligatures were. No weapons found, but there's actually a outline of a dust mark where there's a pipe wrench that was kept on a back patio, and that's missing. So he probably killed her with a pipe wrench. It's hard to tell.
Sounds like this one may have just been because of the time difference, the 5 years, and the house of his uncle or whatever it is that's so close. It might have just been a crime of opportunity. He might have just seen that she was there, seen that she was alone, and just took advantage on the spur of the moment. I
think that very well could be true. I think it could be, less pre-planned than the others. I think you're absolutely right. I think it may have been more of a crime of opportunity where he didn't spend weeks and months stalking her, but maybe saw her somewhere and thought, okay, I'll try this one.
Yeah. Saw her parents leave or something. Yeah.
And her sister maybe, and her friend when her friend finally leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't know what he's done for a living. from 79 to 89. We don't know where he's gone exactly. His second daughter is listed as being born in Los Angeles County. There's an address in Long Beach where he lived for a year, rented a place. We know his house in Citrus Heights was rented out for a few years. We know that he and his wife legally separated in 1991, but are still not divorced. But he starts a job again in 1989, 10 years after being fired from the Auburn Police Force. He starts a job as a mechanic at Save Mart's distribution center in Roseville, California. So he does still keep up the telephone scatologia. He may not be, we don't know for sure that we can't tie any other victims, but he does keep up the telephone torture. In 1991, he calls a previous rape victim and says, "Do you know who this is?" And the call lasts less than a minute, but the woman hears something that's even more horrifying in the background. Children playing and a woman talking. So he may have, his three daughters had been born by then, 1981, 1986, and 1989. And she hears children playing and a woman talking. In April of 2001, a victim from 1977 receives a call from the man she positively identifies as her rapist. And he says, "Remember when we played?" In 2004, Michelle Cruz, the sister of victim Janelle Cruz, receives at least 6 hang-up calls a day for 2 weeks. And it just so happens to be at the time when she's working with Bruce Harrington on getting Proposition 69 passed. Pretty odd coinky-dink, huh? In July of 2012, he is arrested for a DUI. He retires from Save Mart in late 2017 after 28 years, and he plans to spend his retirement fishing on his boat named, are you sitting down? Scary.
That's the name of the boat.
His boat is named Scary. I have pictures of it. It was in his driveway when he was arrested, and there is crime scene tape around it, and you can see the Evan Rude motor in the back and the name Scary written on the side. Scary.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. So in March of 2018, he's identified as a suspect, as one of the suspects that could be in over 50 rapes and 12, and I'm just going to go ahead and call it 13 murders. And it is narrowed down after DNA is collected from a public place that he has discarded. And he is arrested on Tuesday, April 24th, and he's officially booked at 2:29 a.m. on Wednesday, April 25th, 2018. And it happened to be a night I had some insomnia, and my beautiful, brilliant friend Carrie had messaged me and said, "They arrested the Golden State Killer, ? And I'm like, oh, she's so fucking crazy. And nope, she was right. And it has been quite a ride, quite an eventful 3 weeks. And I know it's going to be even more eventful. But I feel like there's no better way to end episode 3 and wrapping up this monster's reign of terror than some of the words of Michelle McNamara, who was prescient when she wrote this 2 years prior to his arrest. And it's added as the epilogue to her book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. And it is called Letter to an Old Man. And she says, "You were your approach, the thump against the fence, a temperature dip from a jimmied open patio door, a blade at the base of the neck. Don't move or I'll kill you. No one had time to sit up. Waking up meant understanding that you're under siege. Your phone lines have been cut, bullets are emptied from your gun, and ligatures are prepared and laid out. Your hands fly to hard-to-find light switches, and you knew their names, the names of their kids, their hangouts. Your pre-planning gave you a crucial advantage because when your victims awoke to a blinding flashlight and clenched teeth threats, you were always a stranger to them, but they were never a stranger to you. You were a voyeur, a patient recorder of habits and routines. The first night a husband working dispatch switched to the graveyard shift, you pounced. There were 4 to 7 day old herringbone shoe impressions beneath the bathroom window at the scene on Thornwood in Sacramento. You put high heels on one girl, something she did in bed with her boyfriend. You stole bikini Polaroids as keepsakes. You stalked around with your needling flashlight and your clipped repetitive phrases, both director and star of the movie unspooling in your head. Almost every victim describes the same scene, a time they could sense your return after a period of distracted ransacking in another part of the house. No words, no movement, but they knew you were standing there, and they could imagine the lifeless gaze coming from the 2 holes in your ski mask. One victim felt you staring at the scar on her back, and after a long while of hearing nothing, she thought, "He's gone." She exhaled just as the knife tip came down and began tracing the end of her scar. Your inadequacies reeked. One victim experimented with reverse psychology and whispered, "You're good," and you abruptly got off of her, amazed. Your tough guy bravado smelled like a bluff. There was a shakiness to your clenched teeth whisper. An occasional stutter was detected. Another victim described to police how you'd briefly grabbed her left breast like it was a doorknob. You were savvy. You knew to park just outside the standard police perimeter between 2 houses or on a vacant lot to avoid suspicion. You opened windows while victims remained asleep. You turned off the AC so you could hear if someone was coming. You left side gates open and rearranged patio furniture so you had a straight shot out. Pedaling at 10 speed, you escaped an FBI agent in a car. You scuttled across roofs. In Danville on July 6th of 1979, a tracking dog reacted so strongly to an ivy shrub on Sycamore Hill Court that the tracker believed the scent pool was merely minutes old. A neighbor witnessed you escape the scene of one attack. You exited the way you entered, without pants. Helicopters, roadblocks, citizen patrols taking down plate numbers, hypnotists, psychics, hundreds of white males chewing on gauze. Nothing. They led nowhere. They led into the dark. The race is yours to win. You're home free. You can feel it. The victims recede from view. Their rhythm is off. Their confidence is drained. They're laden with phobias and made tentative by memory. Divorce and drugs beset them. Statutes of limitations expire. Evidence kits are tossed for lack of room. And they do their best to carry on. So do you. But the game has lost its edge. The script is repetitive and requires a higher stakes. You yield to your darker impulses. It has a different set of rules. You knew you had at least 15 minutes to flee a neighborhood when your victims were left bound and alive in their homes. But when you walk out of Lyman and Charlene Smith's house in Ventura on March 13, 1980, you feel no need to rush. Those bodies won't be found for 3 days. Fireplace log, crowbar, wrench. You kill your victims with objects picked up at their homes. And then after May 4th of 1986, you disappear. Some think you died or went to prison. Not me. I think you bailed when the world began to change. It's true, age must have slowed you. The testosterone, once a gush, was now a trickle. And the truth is, memories fade. Paper decays. but technology improves. And you cut out when you think you looked over your shoulder and saw your opponents gaining on you. The race was yours to win. You were the observer in power, never observed. People who weren't even aware of you or your crimes began devising algorithms that could help find you. The world hummed with connectivity and speed, smartphones, familial DNA. Your heyday prowess has no value anymore. Your skill set has been phased out. The tables have been turned. Virtual windows are opening all around you. You, the master watcher, are an aging, lumbering target in their crosshairs, and even a ski mask won't help you now. One day soon, you'll hear a car pull up to your curb, an engine cut out. You'll hear footsteps coming up your front walk. The doorbell rings. There's no side gate left to open for you now. You're long past leaping over a fence. Take one of your hyper-gulping breaths and clench your teeth. Inch timidly toward the insistent bell. This is how it ends for you. You'll be silent forever and I'll be gone in the dark, you threatened a victim once. Open the door, show us your face, and walk into the light. And that, my beloved tipsters, is episode 3 of Just the Tipsters, the Golden State Killer, Southern California years. And thank you for listening, and more cowbell.
And remember, if you have a tip on the Golden State Killer case or any other case, give us a call at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com.